Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I rise to speak to Minister Cahill's report on domestic violence to the Parliament, of course, in the wake of the coroner's recommendations handed down yesterday. You know, this is an incredibly important issue, and 13 weeks into our government, we are working through what exists in terms of programs, what more needs to be done, how we can spend the funding commitments and all of these types of issues. And of course, now we're looking at the coroner's recommendations and whether they're fit for purpose for a better framework for the territory. And that's the work that's being undertaken now. But this is off the backdrop of an 82% increase in domestic violence over the last 8 years of Labor. And the hypocrisy coming out of the mouths of those opposite today is really quite astounding. Pleas and pledges around urgency, pleas and pledges around working together, pleas and pledges around demands for funding, and yet they've literally just walked out of being in office and demand something from us that they themselves could not give. And so that's fine. It's pretty standard operating procedures by Labor. But to really take that turn on this issue, I think just shows the calibre of the debate we're having today, which is really quite disappointing given the severity of the situation. But in any event, Labor can stand here and grandstand and talk about whatever pledges they like. The reality remains that until the federal government stump up, until communities step up, until a range of things happen, we're going to continue to see these high rates of violence. Now, in the first 2 weeks of Parliament, we've made law changes that put the rights of people to be safe above the rights of criminals. Once those bail laws kick in, it will inevitably capture a portion of domestic violence offenders, and deliberately so. And we're proud of that, because domestic violence rates in the Territory are 3 times higher than the national average, and DV homicide is 7 times the national average. And this is not something that happened overnight. And for the member for Gwoja to again stand here in this hypocritical malaise that they seem to be finding themselves in at the moment, it was he himself and the team they're sitting with who lifted Stronger Futures legislation, let the rivers of grog, as the member for Araluen would put it, flow, and not heed the calls of many in the community and the experts that Labor like to stand with when it suits them, demanding that this be changed. We were actually the ones saying, bring back Stronger Futures. And in the coroner's report, she quotes and talks about a doctor who gave evidence that there was a 77% increase in the average monthly domestic violence assaults in Alice Springs at the end of Stronger Futures. 77% increase. DV has been a massive issue, and yet Labor themselves, through policy failure, ideology, inaction, inertia, failure, allowed this to increase on their watch. So we won't be lectured by Labor, who are struggling to find their feet post-election, seem to have nothing constructive to say when it comes to this and other issues. Because the reality is there is a lot of work to be done here, and we are not blind to that work, and that it is multifaceted and is going to take a different approach forward. And I think it's important to understand that Minister Cahill has spoken with the Federal Domestic Family Sexual Violence Commissioner about the recommendations, about our pathway forward. And she has agreed that by taking a step back and make sure that, assessing that what we're doing is working is prudent. It's important. Because if we don't do that, then what we're saying is we don't care about the outcome, we just want to be seen to be doing something. That's what Labor are saying. Labor are saying to us, don't worry about whether if what you're doing works or is effective or actually saves anyone's life or makes anyone's life better. Just do something so you can say you did it. Because that's the Labor playbook. That's how they do everything. That's why the Territory is in the situation it is in on a range of fronts. That's why the CLP is now in government, because Labor's approach was to govern by press release exclusively. And that doesn't grow an economy. That doesn't keep people safe. That doesn't put food on the table or police on our streets or teachers in our classrooms. It doesn't do anything than serve a selfish, politically motivated, ideologically driven purpose, of which Territorians have had a total gutful of. And so no, Opposition Leader, Member for Gwoja, we won't be just blindly following whatever it was you thought you were doing or whatever it was you announced. Because announcements aren't actions. Actions speak louder than words. We have been very clear as a government that we will make sure that Territorians can judge us on our actions. And that's why we've been working through our election commitments and delivering on the promises we took to the election, the promises for Territorians on a range of issues. Just today, we announced the doubling of the solar feed-in tariff, the doubling of the battery bonus, the doubling of the amount of money available in that scheme. Territory coordinator, payroll tax, home builder, meningococcal bee, Harrison Dam, bag limits on magpie geese, expanding the scope of practice for pharmaceuticals, MVR changes to support cost of living measures, and the list goes on and on. That's action. That's tangible, it's measurable, and people understand it. Bluff and bluster and governing by press release is not what anyone in this community wants, let alone on the issue of domestic violence. So I applaud the Minister for Prevention of Domestic Violence, Minister Cahill, for the steps she is taking to work through this methodically and sensibly. Because in the absence of a giant check from the federal government, we must be very deliberate. There are not all programs are born equal. Not all services are delivered equal. Our job is to make sure we're funding the ones that work. Even something like behavioural change programs. There is mixed evidence about these programs and the way they're run, what's effective, when it isn't effective, how it could be more effective. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're trying to work through. Can we put better parameters around that? Can we invest more in what is working and support a change in that space? Everything's got to be on the table if we're going to truly move forward and be better. But talk is cheap. Territorians are sick of it. It does nothing. We've brought this report to the House because it's important to be open and transparent with Territorians. We've said right from day one, we're not going to rush through these recommendations. We're going to take our time, just like the coroner took hers, because that is good, responsible government. And that is the type of government we will continue to operate on behalf of the good people of the Northern Territory, who know that they want change in this space, that their resources are finite. I want to close, Madam Speaker, in thanking our police, because they have done a huge amount of work in this domestic and family violence space. It is an incredible use of their resources. And policing is not, it's one element of this. I can't put a police officer in everyone's home, nor should I, nor would we want that. And so this isn't on its own a policing issue. Police are there to respond when something bad happens. That's policing. What we want is the bad thing not to happen in the first place. But despite that, we've got policing general orders around intimate partner violence and complicated systems our police have to work through when those reports come through. We've got the co-responder pilot that's happening in Alice Springs. We've got the police risk screening tool that's been developed. We have a dedicated domestic violence response senior sergeant's positions. We have a domestic and family violence audit team. We have a domestic and family violence training cell. We have the prevent, assist, respond training package, and I've been into police stations where our police are literally sitting there at a PowerPoint presentation receiving this training. So police are doing the heavy lifting, but again, that's at the end of the line. What we need is to be looking very carefully at what we can do to change men's behaviour so that women are no longer victims of domestic and family violence.